Usually when we talk about building something monumental, there's this underlying expectation of universal precision.
Right, like you're following an architectural blueprint.
Exactly. You draw up the plans for a perfectly engineered, hyper-modern house.
Yeah.
You have the exact angles for the roof pitch, the precise load-bearing capacity of the concrete.
All the intricate wiring diagrams, everything.
Yeah, all of it. And it's clean, right? It's mathematical.
Oh, absolutely.
And the whole expectation behind that piece of paper is that if you take that blueprint anywhere in the world, literally anywhere, you just follow the lines, pour the concrete, and you get the exact same house.
Which is a deeply comforting thought.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of predictability.
Right.
We're drawn to the idea that a good design is just inherently universal, that a truly brilliant concept transcends geography, transcends culture, and, just works.
But imagine taking that exact same perfectly engineered blueprint, rolling it up, and traveling to, a dense tropical rainforest, or carrying it up to a high-altitude freezing desert, and you try to build the house.
It's not going to go well.
No, because suddenly the materials don't behave the way the math says they should.
Right.
The foundation settles differently because the soil is completely foreign. Or, the extreme humidity just completely warps the wood you were told to use.
Because the blueprint didn't account for any of that.
Exactly. The blueprint is still technically brilliant on paper, but when it collides with the reality of a completely different environment, the picture becomes incredibly murky.
Yeah, you end up with a structure that sort of looks like the plan, but operates entirely differently.
Right, and that forces a really uncomfortable reckoning for the architect, doesn't it?
Massively.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you have to look at this structure and ask, wait, was this blueprint actually a universal law of physics and design?
Or was it just a very, very good local design?
Exactly. A local design that simply forgot it was local. Did it mistake its own specific, hometown conditions for the default state of the entire universe?
And that tension right there, that friction between a supposedly universal blueprint and a wildly diverse reality, that is exactly where we're heading today. Welcome to the deep dive.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. We are cracking open a highly influential, honestly incredibly ambitious body of work today. We're looking at Dipesh Chakrabarty's Provincializing Europe, Postcolonial Thought and Historical Difference.
Such an important text.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive, for you listening right now, is to explore this profound paradox that shapes almost everything about how we view the modern world.
Yeah, the intellectual tools we use.
Right, the tools we use to understand our society, things like democracy, citizenship, social justice, the state, they are deeply genealogically European.
Yes, they are.
Yet we have to use these exact same European tools to understand a global reality that is vastly diverse and, frankly, fundamentally non-European.
And I think it's important to set the tone early here, because the goal isn't to reject European thought. We're not throwing away the blueprint.
Okay, so what are we doing with it?
The mission, as Chakrabarty outlines it, is to provincialize it.
Provincialize Europe.
Right. To provincialize Europe means to recognize that this dominant intellectual tradition, it isn't the universal center of the world from which all human history radiates.
It's just one tradition.
Exactly. It's one specific local tradition that through the brutal forces of imperialism and just the complex sweep of history happen to become globally dominant.
So it's about taking Europe out of the center of the world's imagination and placing it back into the realm of the local.
Alongside everyone else, yes.
I love that. And to guide you through this, we're going to be exploring a core contrast today that really brings this to life.
It really does.
We're going to look at two radically different ideas of how time and progress actually work.
The waiting room versus the now.
Yes. On one side, we have this concept of the colonial waiting room, this historical idea that some nations are simply behind and must literally wait in the lobby of history until they're civilized enough.
And on the other side, the urgency of the democratic now.
Right, the incredible way that anti-colonial movements basically refused to sit in that waiting room and demanded immediate political rights.
A fascinating contrast.
It is. But before we get to that waiting room, a really obvious question comes to mind.
What's that?
If these intellectual ideas, democracy, rights, the state, are just from one specific chilly peninsula in the northern hemisphere, why does everyone, everywhere, use them?
That is the big question.
Right. Why hasn't the rest of the world just invented their own blueprints?
Well, To understand that, we really have to look closely at the Enlightenment.
Okay.
Because the European Enlightenment provided a specific conceptual toolkit that became absolutely indispensable for articulating modern political life anywhere on the globe.
So we're talking about concepts like citizenship, the state, civil society.
The public sphere, human rights, the autonomous individual, equality before the law, all of that. You simply cannot think of political modernity today, whether you're in Tokyo, Nairobi, or Buenos Aires, without invoking these categories. They've basically become the water we swim in.
But aren't those concepts inherently tied to a very specific cultural history? I mean, when I think of the Enlightenment, I think of French salons, British philosophers.
Whigs.
Yeah, lots of Whigs. And a very specific reaction against the European church and absolute monarchs.
They absolutely are tied to that. These concepts bear deep genealogical ties to European history, and even, honestly, to Christian theological traditions.
Really? Like what?
Well, for instance, the very idea of the secular state is a direct response to the specific history of the Catholic Church and the Protestant Reformation.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they're steeped in European blood and ink. But, and this is the crucial part that makes this so complex, they are now a global heritage.
They're universal global tools.
Yes. For social science, they have completely escaped their local origins.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Because you might look at a title like Provincializing Europe and assume this is going to be a complete teardown of Western thought.
Right, a total rejection.
Exactly, like throwing away the colonizers' tools. But the source material is very clear that without this European conceptual toolkit, there would be no modern social science to address social justice at all, anywhere.
Absolutely none. I mean, consider the massive social reform movements in India during the 19th and 20th centuries.
Okay.
You had reformers launching modern critiques of caste oppression, pushing back against the horrifying plight of widows, and fighting the institution of untouchability.
Right.
And all of these profound social justice movements relied heavily on appropriating European ideas of liberty, equality, and rationalism.
Wait, really? Even the critique of colonialism itself?
Yes. The argument that the British had no right to rule India that was built using the colonizers' own Enlightenment tools.
So the colonized people essentially took the philosophical weapons of the colonizer and pointed them right back at them.
Precisely. Look at the Indian Constitution. It begins by echoing universal Enlightenment themes, very similar to what you'd see in the American or French constitutions.
Wow.
Think about B.R. Ambedkar, one of the primary architects of the Indian Constitution, and just a trenchant critic of untouchability.
What did he do?
He didn't look back to ancient Hindu texts to argue for the abolition of the caste system.
Why not?
Because those texts often codified that very system.
Yeah.
Instead, he referred back to originally European ideas about fundamental human equality.
Oh, I see.
These concepts provide a secular vision of the human that is incredibly powerful. The European colonizers preached this Enlightenment humanism while simultaneously denying it in practice to the people they colonized.
Right, hypocrisy.
Exactly. But the vision itself, the blueprint, provided a foundation for marginalized people to demand their own humanity.
I want to pause on that because it feels like a bit of a trap.
How so?
Well, if you're a post-colonial thinker or a leader of a marginalized group, and you're trying to build a society that is truly free from colonial influence, isn't using their intellectual tools a bit like trying to dismantle the master's house using the master's tools?
Yeah, that famous Audre Lorde quote.
Right. Are we saying people are permanently trapped using European concepts just to express their own desire for freedom?
It is a profound tension, and it's one that post-colonial scholars grapple with constantly. But Chakrabarty suggests it's less of a prison and more of a complex, necessary engagement.
Okay.
Take Frantz Fanon, one of the most vital post-colonial thinkers of the 20th century.
Remind us who he is.
He was a psychiatrist from Martinique who became a key figure in the Algerian struggle for independence against France.
Mm-hmm.
He saw firsthand the horrific violence the French inflicted on Algerians.
Awful stuff.
Horrific. And yet, Fanon fought bitterly to hold on to the Enlightenment idea of the human.
Wait, even though the French, who supposedly invented that modern idea of the human, were the ones committing the violence against him?
Yes. Fanon saw that the European imperialists had reduced the concept of humanity to only apply to the white European settler. They hoarded the concept.
Wow, they hoarded humanity.
Exactly. But Fanon didn't throw the concept away. He seized the tool to build something wider and more inclusive. He wanted to expand the definition of the human to actually include the colonized subject.
That is so powerful.
The reality is that there is no easy way to dispense with these universals. If you throw out the concept of human rights just because it was forged in 18th century Europe, you lose the very language required to fight modern systemic oppression.
You lose the vocabulary of liberation.
Exactly.
Okay, I see the utility, the tools are indispensable, but since we all globally use this exact same toolkit, it creates this bizarre academic and intellectual imbalance, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the whole world is using a European blueprint, it completely skews how we treat the inventors of these tools versus how we treat brilliant thinkers from other parts of the world.
It creates what Chakrabarty refers to as the asymmetry of ignorance, or an asymmetry of citation. And it is incredibly pervasive in how we produce knowledge today.
Let's break down what that asymmetry actually looks like in practice, because the source material points out that a third world historian, say a brilliant scholar working at a university in Delhi, feels absolutely compelled to cite European greats.
Right.
To be taken seriously in the global academic community, they have to know the work of British historians like E.P. Thompson or Italian scholars like Carlo Ginzburg.
Yes, it's mandatory.
And if they don't know the European canon, their work is considered, poorly trained, outdated, lacking theoretical rigor.
Exactly. But flip the scenario.
Okay.
A European historian working in Paris or London can comfortably, safely ignore entirely non-Western histories.
Really?
And it doesn't affect the perceived quality of their output at all. They can write sweeping, massive books on the nature of the working class or the development of the state without ever citing an Indian, African, or Latin American scholar.
That's wild.
They don't have to return the gesture. The ignorance only flows one way.
It's like a software dependency.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, if you're building an app anywhere in the world, you have to know how the core operating system works, which was built in Silicon Valley. But the engineers in Silicon Valley don't need to know anything about the specific local app you're building in Mumbai.
That's a perfect analogy.
But it goes deeper than just citations, doesn't it? It affects how we view the actual thinkers themselves.
It dictates who is considered intellectually alive and who's considered dead.
Alive versus dead.
Yeah. In modern social science departments around the world, the European intellectual tradition is the only one treated as a living, breathing dialogue. We read Karl Marx or Max Weber, and we argue with them as if they are our contemporaries.
Right, like they're in the room with us.
Exactly. Offering theoretical frameworks we can apply to a gig economy worker in 2026.
Well, at the very same time, brilliant non-Western thinkers are treated like museum exhibits. The text mentions thinkers like the 13th century Indian logician Gangisa or the 5th century Sanskrit grammarian Bhartrihari. I mean, these were massive intellects who built incredibly complex systems of thought.
Truly profound systems.
But today, they're treated as truly dead. They're subjects of historical research, sure. You might write a paper on what Gangisa thought in the 13th century.
But no modern social scientist is bringing Gangisa into a debate about contemporary political economy or modern statecraft.
Right. They are treated as historical curiosities, completely bereft of any modern theoretical use.
Which brings us to the core paradox at the heart of the social sciences. We have a situation where a few generations of European philosophers produced universal theories of humanity theories about how all societies evolve, how all economies function, while living in near total ignorance of the vast majority of humanity.
Wait, that is crazy when you say it out loud.
Right. Kant, Hegel, Marx, they knew almost nothing about the complex, lived realities of societies in India, China, or Africa.
And yet, paradoxically, we find these European theories eminently useful for understanding non-Western societies today.
We do. So Europe remains the sovereign, theoretical subject of all histories. Even if you're writing a history of a labor strike in Kenya, the theoretical skeleton holding your book together is likely European.
Okay, if Europe is treated as the theoretical center of the world, and European thought is the only living thought, how does that affect how we view the actual progress of the rest of the world?
That is the crucial question.
Because if Europe is the ultimate blueprint, what happens to everyone else who is trying to build their house? How do we categorize the people who don't look like the blueprint?
That leads us directly into one of the most important concepts we need to tackle today, historicism.
Historicism. I hear that word and my eyes kind of glaze over.
I know. It sounds very academic.
It sounds like something you'd hear in a graduate seminar. How does it actually function in the real world?
In this context, historicism refers to a very specific mode of thought. It's the idea that to understand anything, a culture, a nation, an institution, you have to look at it in terms of its historical developmental stages.
Okay. stages of development.
Right. It assumes that there is a single, universal timeline of human progress. And historicism structures global time as a movement from an origin point in Europe, radiating outward to the rest of the world. It is the logic of first in Europe, then elsewhere.
Okay, let's try an analogy to make this tangible for the listener.
Go for it.
Think of historicism like a sequential software rollout for a massive global video game.
Okay, I'm with you.
The developers, who happen to live in Europe, release version 1.0 of the Modernity expansion pack. They get it first.
Naturally.
They're playing the game, building industrialized cities, experiencing secular democracy, unlocking all the new features.
And what about everyone else?
The rest of the world. They are stuck in the pregame lobby on a terrible dial-up connection. And the developers in Europe look at the people in the lobby and say, sorry, you can't play the game of modernity yet. Your culture hasn't downloaded the necessary Enlightenment patches.
You haven't finished the Industrial Revolution side quest.
Exactly. You just have to wait in the lobby for a few centuries until your download finishes, and then you can play the same game we're playing.
That lobby is exactly what Chakrabarty memorably calls the imaginary waiting room of history.
The waiting room of history.
Yes. Historicism posits that historical time is actually a measure of cultural distance. It assumes that different people are moving along the exact same timeline, just at different speeds.
Okay.
Therefore, it justifies the idea that some people are simply not yet ready for the present. They are geographically in the present day, but temporally they are treated as if they belong to the past.
And this wasn't just some abstract academic theory debated in Oxford common rooms, right? This was the exact weaponized logic used to justify colonial ideology and brutal oppression.
Oh, absolutely.
The colonizers literally looked at entire continents and said, you aren't ready to govern yourselves. The source material brings up John Stuart Mill here, which completely blew my mind.
It's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah. Mill is basically the poster boy for Western liberal thought. He wrote the book On Liberty.
He did. He wrote foundational liberal essays like On Liberty and On Representative Government. And he proclaimed forcefully that self-rule and representative democracy was the highest, noblest form of government humanity had ever conceived. But relying completely on historicist logic, he argued against giving self-rule to Indians or Africans.
Wait, the guy who defined modern liberty didn't want other people to have it? How did he justify that without sounding completely hypocritical?
By using the waiting room, he argued that they were not yet civilized enough to handle the machinery of freedom. He categorized them as being in the childhood of human development.
The childhood, wow.
He argued that they needed a period of preparation, of strict tutelage under colonial rule, before they could be considered prepared for the responsibility of freedom.
So he literally consigned millions of people to the waiting room,
arguing that colonial domination was actually a necessary educational phase to get them ready for the future.
It is wild because it converts the simple passage of time into a metric for human worth. It denies a concept that anthropologists call coevalness.
Yes, coevalness.
Which, simply put, is the fact that we all exist on this planet at the exact same time.
Right.
It says, yes, we are both standing here breathing the air in the year 1850, but I am living in the modern present, and you are essentially a walking fossil living in the past.
And that is the underlying violence of historicism. It came to non-European peoples in the 19th and 20th centuries as somebody's way of saying, not yet, to somebody else.
Not yet.
Yeah. It told the colonized that acquiring a proper historical consciousness meant learning the art of waiting. It told them their present reality was inadequate, and they had to endure colonial rule to someday reach the real present, which just so happened to look exactly like Europe.
But nobody wants to sit in a dial-up lobby forever while someone else is playing the game.
No, they don't.
Especially when the people running the lobby are violently exploiting you. So how did the colonized break out of this waiting room? Because they clearly didn't just wait for the download to finish.
No, they absolutely did not. And this is where we see the massive clash between the colonial not yet and the anti-colonial now.
The now.
20th century anti-colonial nationalist movements across the globe simply refused to wait. They rejected the premise of the waiting room entirely. They deployed a politics of the urgent now.
I love that.
They didn't wait for the subaltern classes, the rural peasants, the tribal communities, the uneducated factory workers. They didn't wait for them to be formally educated into the polite bourgeois ideals of European citizenship.
They brought them into the modern political sphere immediately.
Immediately.
And the most dramatic, undeniable example of this from the sources is what happened in India right after it gained independence.
It's a staggering moment in history.
So remember, John Stuart Mill had literally said, universal teaching must precede universal enfranchisement.
Right, education before voting.
The European blueprint says you have to teach people to read, write, and understand complex liberal philosophy before you give them the responsibility of voting. And even leading up to independence, an Indian Franchise Committee in 1931 basically agreed with the British logic, saying that the massive illiteracy in the country was a huge, almost insurmountable obstacle to a true democracy.
But look at what the newly independent Indian state actually did.
What did they do?
In its very first constitution, adopted in 1950, India implemented universal adult franchise. They gave the right to vote to every single adult citizen, regardless of wealth, gender, caste, or education.
Wow.
They gave the vote to a population that was overwhelmingly non-literate and agrarian.
That is incredible.
Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, a profound philosopher who later became the first vice president of India, he stood before the Constituent Assembly and explicitly rejected the idea that Indians needed to undergo a period of historical tutelage.
He rejected the waiting room.
Yes. He stated that the Republican tradition, the capacity for self-rule, was not foreign to the genius of the country. They did not need to wait to become European before they could be free.
Let's really think about the monumental logistical and philosophical nature of that decision for a second. In one massive, sweeping democratic performance, India practically abolished the historicist waiting room.
Overnight, basically.
Think about a non-literate peasant walking into a voting booth in 1952. On that election day, historicist time is completely suspended.
Yes, suspended.
That peasant is not treated as someone who is in the past. They aren't treated as a developmental project that needs 50 years of schooling before their voice matters. In that specific moment, holding that ballot, they are treated as a fully capable, completely modern citizen right now.
It is a breathtaking national gesture of refusing the not yet. They claimed the present.
Yeah.
But as Chakrabarty points out, this incredible achievement creates a tremendous conceptual tension for historians and social scientists trying to study it.
Why? What's the tension?
Because on one hand, the bureaucratic state is always trying to develop the peasant, building schools, modernizing agriculture, which is a very historicist, progressive project.
Sure.
But on the other hand, through mass democracy, the peasant is already a full political actor, dictating the direction of the state.
And this brings up a huge problem for traditional historians, right? Because the European blueprint tells them what a proper political actor looks like.
Exactly.
A traditional Marxist or liberal historian expects modern political actors to act like secular, rational, European bourgeois citizens. They expect them to vote based on economic self-interest or class consciousness. But the peasants in India didn't act like that.
Not at all. And this leads us directly into the foundational work of the Subaltern Studies Collective, which Chakrabarty helped create.
Subaltern studies.
Yes. The collective emerged to study the history of the lower classes, the subalterns, whose voices were entirely left out of both colonial histories and elite nationalist histories.
Okay, so they were looking at the people on the ground.
Right. And there is a very famous illuminating clash highlighted in the text between the renowned British Marxist historian Eric Hobsbawm and Ranajit Guha, the founder of Subaltern Studies.
Break this clash down for us. What were they looking at, and why did they disagree so fundamentally?
They were both looking at the massive, widespread peasant insurgencies that swept across India in the 19th and 20th centuries. These were huge uprisings against colonial landlords and the British state.
Okay, so a classic class struggle.
Well, that's what Hobsbawm thought. Hobsbawm, looking through the traditional European Marxist lens, categorized these peasant rebellions as pre-political or archaic.
Why pre-political? I mean, they were overthrowing landlords and fighting the state. How is that not political? Is it because the peasants weren't, passing out pamphlets on dialectical materialism or unionizing in a traditional way?
Partially, yes. But more importantly, it was about how they mobilized. The peasants weren't using the secular language of class struggle. They were invoking gods and spirits.
Gods and spirits.
Yes. They claimed divine injunctions told them to rebel. Their rebellions were organized along lines of kinship, religion, and caste, not secular economic solidarity.
Oh, I see.
So to Hausbaum, looking through a historicist lens, this meant the peasants hadn't yet acquired a proper secular political language.
Yeah.
Because they invoked the supernatural, he viewed them as anachronisms. He believed they belonged to an earlier primitive stage of history and hadn't yet evolved into modern political subjects.
But Ranajit Guha completely rejects this categorization, right?
Entirely. He looks at the exact same rebellions and says, no, you absolutely cannot call them pre-political. These were highly organized, deeply political struggles over power and resources.
Right.
Guha argued that the peasant wasn't some primitive relic of the past. The peasant was fully modern and a contemporary of colonialism. It's just that the political sphere in South Asia is fundamentally braided with non-secular logic.
The blueprint is different.
Exactly. The blueprint is different.
And this is where Chakrabarty develops a profound and frankly beautiful philosophical distinction between what he calls History 1 and History 2.
Yes, this is a core concept.
Let's get into it. So History 1 is the history we are all familiar with from standard social science. It's the abstract, universal, secular time of capital.
Right. It's the narrative of transition, of modernization, of rational economic actors.
It insists on a disenchanted world where gods and spirits are not real. They are just sociological metaphors for economic anxiety or class solidarity.
Right, so History 1 looks at a peasant uprising and says, when they say the river goddess told them to attack the landlord, what they actually mean is that the taxation rate on grain was too high.
Right, it translates their spiritual belief into cold, rational economics.
Yes, History 1 translates the lived experience into the universal European blueprint.
But History 2 is where it gets wildly fascinating.
It really does.
History 2 represents plural temporalities. It represents different life worlds and ways of being human, where gods, spirits, and the divine are not metaphors. They are real agents in human affairs.
They have actual stakes in the political reality.
Imagine you're an archivist reviewing historical records from one of these rebellions, and the peasants explicitly say on the record, "The forest gods commanded us to take up arms."
And European history, History 1, reads that and says, that's just primitive superstition masking their material conditions.
But Chakrabarty says, no, stop translating it. Listen to them. For them, it is a reality. The gods are actual, active actors in their political modernity.
And this introduces one of the most powerful concepts in the book, time knots.
Time knots.
Chakrabarty argues that the present moment is not a single, homogeneous, empty timeline moving neatly forward like a conveyor belt.
Like we've been taught.
Right. The present is plural and deeply entangled. It is a time knot. You have the secular, institutional, bureaucratic logic of the state operating right alongside and intimately braided together with life practices that involve the supernatural, the divine, and the ancestral.
Wow.
And here's the crucial point. Neither is less modern than the other. They are existing coevally. They're knotted together in the exact same present.
This is such a mind-bending concept because it forces us to stop seeing people who believe in spirits or who organize their lives around non-rational rituals as being somehow behind us in time.
Yes.
They aren't in the waiting room. They are right beside us, riding the subway, using smartphones, existing in a time knot where multiple ways of being human operate simultaneously.
Beautifully put.
But it wasn't just the rural agrarian peasants who created a uniquely non-European modernity, was it?
Yep.
The educated city-dwelling middle classes, the ones who actually read the European blueprint, they did it too, but they did it through a process of translation.
Yes, exactly. In his work, Chakrabarty shifts focus to the Bengali middle-class modernity in the 19th and early 20th centuries.
Bingo, okay.
And this brings up a vital question. What actually happens when a non-Western elite who are deeply steeped in their own ancient traditions consciously adopt European Enlightenment ideas?
What does happen?
The text argues that capitalist modernity isn't just a sociological problem of historical transition, of simply moving from an agricultural society to an industrial one. It is fundamentally a problem of translation.
Right, because when the educated elite in Bengal adopted European ideas like citizenship, human rights, or civil society, they didn't just copy and paste them.
No, they didn't.
They didn't just turn into English liberals wearing different clothes. They translated those concepts. And in doing so, they created something entirely new, a hybrid formation that was neither purely European nor purely traditional.
Let's unpack some of the specific examples because seeing this translation in action is fascinating.
Let's talk about the campaign against domestic cruelty and the plight of the widow.
Okay, in the 19th century, Bengali social reformers like Ramohun Roy and Vidyasagar fought incredibly hard against the terrible oppression of widows in Hindu society. including the horrific practice of sati.
The burning of widows.
Yes. Now, to fight these deeply entrenched local injustices, they absolutely utilized European Enlightenment ideas of universal human compassion, reason, and individual rights.
So they used the colonizers' toolkit to fight local oppression.
They did, but they didn't just replicate cold European rationality. They didn't just argue a legalistic case for human rights.
How did they do it then?
They filtered this Enlightenment compassion through very specific Bengali ontological assumptions about the heart, emotion, and familial duty.
Oh, that's interesting.
They created a discourse where the modern enlightened subject was also deeply emotional and tethered to indigenous concepts of spiritual empathy. It was a translation that produced a genuinely hybrid modern subject.
My favorite example from the sources regarding this translation is the comparison between the European coffee house and the Bengali Ada.
Oh, the Ada, yes.
This perfectly illustrates how a concept changes when it hits a new environment. So in European thought, you have the philosopher Jürgen Habermas, who developed this idea of the public sphere.
Right.
And he traced the birth of the public sphere to the coffee houses of 18th century Europe.
The Habermasian model. In these European coffee houses, men of different social ranks would gather, leaving their status at the door, to engage in rational, critical discourse.
Right.
They were detached from the state and detached from the church. And the entire underlying point of the European coffee house was purposive.
Purposive meaning they had a goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You debated an issue, say trade tariffs or political rights, with the ultimate goal of reaching a rational consensus. The conversation was a tool to arrive at a logical conclusion.
But then you look at Bengal and you have the institution of the Ada. On the surface, it looks very similar.
It does.
It was a gathering of educated men in a public space exchanging ideas and debating politics. It looks like they adopted the blueprint of the public sphere, but the logic of the Ada was completely opposed to the Habermasian model.
Completely opposed. The Ada wasn't organized around reaching a rational consensus. It wasn't purposive in the European sense.
What was it then?
It was a space of sociality, valued precisely for its open-endedness. The measure of a truly great Ada was its capacity to go on, tangling and untangling ideas without ever needing to reach a definitive conclusion.
Just talking for the sake of talking.
Exactly. It was about the joy of unending conversation, the performance of intellect, and the building of communal bonds.
I love that so much. It is taking the architectural form of the European public sphere men gathering to debate, but translating it into a completely different cultural rhythm. The blueprint says, debate to reach a conclusion. The translation says, debate for the profound joy of never concluding.
It's a wonderful distinction.
And there is one more major example of this translation in the text, the idea of fraternity.
Yes, the concept of fraternity is foundational to Western democratic thought. But the Lockean liberal model of fraternity, named after John Locke, is basically contractual.
Contractual brotherhood.
Right. Locke argued that for men to come together as equals in a civil society, the traditional absolute political authority of the father must be metaphorically destroyed.
So you have to rebel against the patriarch.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
You have to overcome paternal familial authority to create a brotherhood of autonomous, self-interested individuals bound by a social contract.
You have to sever the old family ties to build the new democratic state. But the Bengali nationalist writers translated this idea of political brotherhood very differently, didn't they?
They did. They imagined their new political community as a fraternity, absolutely. But they conceptualized it as a natural brotherhood, not a contractual one based on self-interest.
Natural brotherhood.
Yeah, they didn't feel the need to symbolically destroy the father's authority to form their brotherhood. Instead, they subordinated the European idea of the autonomous, isolated individual to this deeply rooted concept of natural familial solidarity.
They used the language of family to describe the nation.
Exactly. Now, Chakrabarty is quick to point out that this Bengali model had its own massive flaws. I mean, it was deeply patriarchal and frequently excluded Muslims and lower castes from its vision of natural brotherhood.
Right, it wasn't perfect.
No, but the intellectual point remains. It was a distinct, profound translation, not a perfect copy of Locke.
It proves that the European blueprint is never perfectly applied. The materials of local life, the history, the spirits, the deeply held cultural rhythms, the history twos, they always interrupt, modify, and translate the universal theories of History 1.
They do.
And when you really look at it, that is actually a necessary and incredibly beautiful thing. It means the world remains radically heterogeneous. We aren't all just becoming imperfect clones of 18th century Europe.
It is a reminder that modernity is not a monologue delivered by Europe to the rest of the world. It is a complex, ongoing, often messy dialogue.
Let's take a breath and look at the incredible ground we have covered today.
We covered a lot.
We really did. We started by looking at the vital, indispensable toolkit of the European Enlightenment ideas, like democracy, human rights, and the state tools that we all rely on to fight for justice today.
Yeah.
We sat in the claustrophobic colonial waiting room of historicism,
Yeah.
where millions of people were told they were not yet ready for the modern world.
We saw how colonized people violently broke out of that room through the urgency of the democratic now.
Yes. Proving that a non-literate peasant is a full political citizen the moment they hold a ballot. And we discovered that the world actually operates in these beautiful, tangled time knots, where the secular timeline of capital and the enchanted timeline of gods and spirits run parallel and wrap around each other.
And, knowledge is only truly valuable when it alters how we view our daily reality.
Absolutely.
When you look at global news tomorrow, or even when you look at the structure of your own corporate workplace, ask yourself, whose timeline are we using? Who is subtly being put into a waiting room because they don't perfectly fit the dominant model of progress? Are we assuming that everyone, every nation, every community, every individual must follow the exact same developmental path to be considered advanced or valuable?
That is such a powerful lens to view the world through. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, bringing this massive global theory right down to your personal life.
Okay.
Throughout this deep dive, we have talked about gods and spirits, the unquantifiable, non-rational beliefs, the little rituals, the gut feelings that operate entirely outside the realm of cold, secular logic.
Yes.
Think about the gods and spirits that still quietly drive your daily life, the superstitions you hold on to, the family traditions that make no economic sense, the profound moments of awe that defy rationality. What if, instead of viewing those things as embarrassing relics of your past that you need to outgrow or rationalize away to be a proper modern person, you accepted them as your own vital history too?
Wow.
What if those tangled, irrational beliefs are exactly what gives your modern life its actual meaning? What happens to your worldview when you realize that you too are living in a time knot?
It fundamentally changes how we view ourselves and honestly deepens our empathy for how we view others.
It really does. It untangles so much by allowing us to stay knotted. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the architecture of history. We hope you leave with a slightly different blueprint for how to view the world and a lot more appreciation for the materials you're building it with. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.